nation, and all of them shared this like colonial past where there was a foreign colonial power that basically built the infrastructure, the administration. It had departed, and now these nations face the task of rebuilding. They had the mandate of the people after independence to build a new future for themselves. And what you see that's really unique and singular to India is that because they never went through the natural process of forming a nation state. They never went through, let's say, like a European nation state's history of like Germany's history, 1,000-year history of building its civil institutions, its civil society, and organically building a nation state. The nation state was sort of forcibly put together along the British colonial regime's supply lines. So because they never went through that process, they ended up, what India really does uniquely is it targets its minorities from its very inception, from 1947 onwards. You look at the engagement of Indian Army, it's all about attacking, carpet bombing, aerial bombing of minorities in the periphery of India, mostly non-Hindu or lower caste Hindu, Muslims, Sikhs, Dalits, Buddhists. There's Hyderabad sort of carpet bombing that happens in Kashmir in 47, 48, and you see genocide in Hyderabad right away in 47, and that sort of continues. And what you see is that there's no other nation that engages in this amount of warfare and ritualistic violence, where it's spectacular violence conducted against its own people. And the core reason that I think that that's the case is that there is a drive to dehumanize the other. That's at the very core of the Hindu civil society, the Hindu civilizational discourse. Because it's built on the caste structure, there has to be an other that's there at the bottom, right? There has to be a Dalit, an untouchable, a Sikh, who they usually consider something between Shudra and Chandal by and large, or Muslims that are considered Malesh. So there's always this mythology around, the other. That's not just an other, it's the other that gives their own society lifeblood. So because there's a Dalit, because there's a lower caste, there can be an upper caste. And so there's this form of sort of imposition of social death onto the other. There has to be domination, there has to be degradation, there has to be sort of this alienation of the other that you don't see in these other societies. And so you see from the very beginning the targeting of the most sacred six spaces, the most things that are most sacred for any community. The sacred spaces, the gurdwara, your relations, the targeting of women, and the sort of ritualistic, gratuitous violence, right? Violence that doesn't really have any sense to it. It's pre-logical. It's outside of, rational, political, legal paradigms. So, for example, in 1984, one thing that is often cited is that if the logic was that the state is looking to arrest X amounts of dissidents or something, why did it attack 37 different shrines, practically all major shrines of Gurdwara in Punjab simultaneously? And why was there no utilitarian method employed in that engagement? If you look at counterexamples in Mecca, where the Saudi government went in dealing with some militants, they cut off the electricity, they cut off the food supply, the water supply, and they waited, essentially. They did not use tanks, they did not use helicopters, they did not bring in their the different forces, security forces, to slaughter pilgrims. So in 84, the Indian state acted in an irrational, ritualistic manner to not suppress a political movement, but to injure the psyche of a people that don't subscribe, that don't fit into its caste hierarchy. And that form of social death that is, its essential nature is parasitic. The core reason for this violence is not to even eliminate the other, which is something you see in normal ethnic conflicts, communal conflicts. The essential nature of this violence is social death, because it wants you to feel degraded. It wants to humiliate you and harm you in ways that are unprecedented and that are essentially have no utility to them. There's no utility to bombing Darbar Sahib. There's no utility to killing pilgrims in the most sanctified, most sacred spaces. The only extraction is degradation, domination, and sort of general dishonor. Dishonor not for what you did, but for what you are. The Dalit or the Sikh or the Muslim is not dishonored in his action, he's dishonored in his being, according to Brahmanism. So I'll leave it at that for now, but I think that the core is...
Yeah, no, that was good. I want to ask about, because in the aftermath of both June 1984 and November 1984, you see that, another view is that, this was sort of Hindu majoritarian society requires the otherizing of the Sikh people. And they won subsequently huge electoral victories after both June 1984 and November 1984. So I don't want to reduce it to just sort of some game for electoral politics, but what's your idea about that contention that, there was this, and it continues to be this sort of genocidal impulse within this community that has been radicalized, and like you said, this is anger that's been pent up for thousands of years, sort of the emasculation by the Mughals, and then the Sikhs not fitting into the category of Hindu. So how do you sort of interpret that sentiment that there is this powder keg of India that has this genocidal impulse that requires the othering of the Sikh community or the Muslim community, when you see what happened in Gujarat and other places, the anti-Muslim sentiment, and just, connecting it to, what happened this month, this intense delusion, fantasy of retribution against the other, in this case, Pakistan. So if you could speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think the core takeaway there is that the Indian state is a phantasmatic construct, right? It never existed. There was not even a political unit or an administrative unit known as the Indian nation state prior to the British colonizing the entire subcontinent. So there's that fragility, right? That's there because it knows, in its heart, that this is all a construct and it's fake. It doesn't have any roots in the organic culture, the history, the civil society. That this is a colonial construct that they ended up with due to European colonialism being in Asia. And I think India risks, confronting its own lack most clearly when it faces a different paradigm like Sikhi. So anyone that is any life world that challenges its fantasy, that challenges its authority, its claim to authority itself, is threatening. So what you see in the figure of Sanjay Nail Singh is not just a political dissident. You see a subjectivity, a self, that undoes the entire facade of the state's authority. The state's authority doesn't work. It doesn't have any jurisdiction in front of a practicing Sikh. And that is not a political crisis, right? That's a crisis. That's a crisis of Hindu metaphysics unfolding. So the Sikhs don't just show up as a political threat. They show up as a ontological, existential threat. And they're not just a threat like the Marxists are a threat in India, right? They or the Muslims are a threat in the same way because Sikhs are native and because they cannot be ostracized as just external invaders or some intellectual Marxists who don't really have any teeth to their critiques, and they want essentially reform. The Sikh way of life and the Sikh life world is antagonistic to the Brahmanical order, and I think that's one point that's important to kind of underscore is that it's not a conflict; it's an antagonism. Conflicts are topical on-tech level problems, right? That can be solved. You can have conflicts between different identities. You can have conflicts between ethnicities. When you have an ontological antagonism, right? The Brahmanical structure is essentially an antagonism of being itself, right? This is dualistic. It has those who are human, the upper caste, and those who are they're not subhuman, they're not human, right? If you look at the Vedas and where the Purusha Suktra, the first iteration of how caste is defined, you're not dealing with humans that are less gifted or they are not as intellectually sharp. When you're talking about the Dalits and untouchables, you're dealing with beings that are sentient that don't have humanity, that are compared to inanimate objects like rocks. In the initial myth, the body of the Brahma is constituted in its head by Brahmins, shoulders and arms by Kshatriyas, the warriors, the traders and the farmers are the Vash, the Shudras are the feet. The Dalits are not the feet. They're not part of this cosmic body. So they're formed of a different substance. And that substance is a category, right? It's not just XYZ, one identity. So this is not a problem of identity. It's a problem of ontological antagonism that cannot be resolved. Right? There's no reconciliation. There's no transmission. There's no way of transitioning from a Dalit to upper caste, from a Malaish to a Hindu, from by extension, by as a Sikh to a Hindu either. So there's a much deeper problem that the West doesn't have the lens to even register yet. That's a whole other topic. But I just want to underscore that this is not a conflict. It's a much deeper antagonism that hasn't been properly discussed.
And then I want to focus in on Santaji and his Shahidi on June 6th, since we are commemorating the sacrifice this week. How do you view Santaji's role in this? I think in terms of sort of flipping the system on its head and challenging the entire sort of monopoly of violence that India has. And Harjit, if you want to interject, go ahead too. If you want to sort of answer this as well, it's just sort of Harjit, was it related to this question, or do you want to? You can go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add because once we move to Santaji, we'll be moving on to a slightly different aspect. But I just wanted to add two short, you can say, corollaries to what Sardar Amandeep Singh just said. One is that all that he said, I wanted to just share how this actually manifests in reality. And this is an example that Amandeep actually gave me in one of his talks a couple of months back. And I kind of thought a lot about it. And if you think about it, it's a live example in front of you, how it manifests. So if you look at the Brahmanical system or Hindu Rashtra, where it is basically the Ganga Jamuna area, the Hindi heartland. That is where, if you talk to anybody, whether it's any Brahmin from Punjab and, South, they're all looking up to Ganga Jamuna civilization as the ideal civilization that they want to copy. That's where the heart is. Varanasi and all these places are right up there. So what is the societal structure there? You see, Brahman is at the very top, along with the other two twice borns, which roughly make up 15% of the society: the Rajput, the Thakurs, and the Baniyas. And then the 85% is all, which includes the Shudras, the backward caste, which primarily are the farmers and the peasants. and they are at the bottom. It doesn't matter in that social hierarchy whether being Brahman, your Varn is your highest social currency. So if you're a Brahman, doesn't matter if you, even if you don't have many means, doesn't matter if your IQ is very low, you will be respected. You will be respected by the landlord. You will be respected by the district commissioner, by the politicians, just pure by the fact that you are a Brahman. Kshatriya will command a level of respect, even if he's the most coward man on planet Earth. He will still be looked upon as the Kshatriya. Now come to Punjab, and this is where the animosity with Sikhi kind of manifests itself. Here, the social currency is totally, or the social pyramid is totally inverted. The farmer is at the top. Like the more work you do with your hand, the more social progress or social respect you get. And the Brahman or somebody is basically at the bottom. So anybody who basically, so the Brahman word itself in Punjabi, in Sikh culture, is, it means somebody who doesn't want to work, the lazy guy who just wants to preach and who doesn't want to move around his hands and feet. So you see, there's this total inversion under Sikhi. Society inverts. There is equal distribution of more equal distribution of power, and more you work hard, the more social respect and more social prosperity you get. And the less and less you work, as you keep going down this ladder of, oh, I'm just going to preach and tell people what to do, the less and less respect and less income you get. So this is in total contradiction to the Brahmanical or the Hindu way of society, how they want to structure the society. So if the same Brahman, who when he travels in the streets of Lucknow, people will treat him like uttermost respect. The moment he is walking down the street of Amritsar, even the kids will laugh at him. Look, this Brahman is acting too, smart, while he actually cannot do anything with his hands. So this is kind of a practical, manifestation of how this manifests. You can actually see it. You don't even have to intellectualize this, or you can see this in the way the society is structured. That is one. And I think the Brahmins, and that is the core. Now that the power is with this way of life, which is the Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb, they are not going to relent. They are not going to let this other way of living, where the social hierarchy gets inverted, where they go to the bottom, they have to destroy it or take it over and assimilate it. So there's no way they can total. So the way they kind of go about it is, from day one, when India got so-called independence, they started off destroying the backbone of Punjab, constructed these dams, looted, extracted all the resources, systemically kind of converting into a desert. And we will talk more about it, how that has become like a gradual genocide. So if you see, their idea was always to break the spirit and the self-respect of the Punjabis. And the only thing they say is, you should admit to our way of life. The day you submit and call yourself Hindu in mind and body, that means you adopt to the Varn ashram way of organizing the societal structure, and you don't fight it. That is when then you are totally acceptable. So in that sense, it is irrational. It is totally irrational, this way of setting up a society, because in this, the net benefit of the society reduces. Only the top 15% have, like, I won't even say they have material prosperity, but they definitely have a superiority prosperity. Whatever comes with the idea of that I am superior to this other guy. So it's irrational. It gives a psychological utility, though it still gives a psychological utility to the top 15%. But so that's why I'll try to call it not utility. It has a utility, but that utility is psychological and only for the top 15%. The other thing I wanted to touch upon was the idea of nation state, and Sardar Amandeep Singh is very right. Most of the European countries are nation states, but the problem with India is definitely the fact that India never got through a process where these nations decided what kind of state they want. But the problem in India was the handful of casteist elite imposed upon the subcontinent the idea that you are a nation. We want to construct a nation state. India can never be a nation state. It can never be, because India is not a nation. A nation is people with the same culture, same values, same morality. And so Punjabis are a nation, The millions are a nation. Bengalis are a nation. Spaniards are a nation. Germans are a nation. India is not a nation. There is no language called Indian. There is no way of dress called Indian. There is no culture called Indian. There is no cuisine called Indian. It is a Punjabi cuisine or a Bengali cuisine or a Bengali way of life and a Punjabi. So these nations, forcibly converting them into one nation is the main project. Because once you are able to, and which nation you are going to convert them to? You are going to convert them to the Varnashram driven nation, the nation that is sitting as the Hindi heartland. So that project is an evil project. If Gandhi and the casteist elite had, and the whole idea and the partition of Punjab was driven by the fact that Jinnah was saying it is not one nation, but Gandhi and Nehru said it is one nation, and that one nation is the Bharat nation. It's a fake idea. If they had admitted that we are 29 nations, then things would have been very different. So there are two things I wanted to touch upon. Yeah.
Thank you, Amandeep Singh. Amandeep Singh, if you wanted to expand on sort of social death and sort of how Sikhs felt, obviously after 1947 and the period onwards, there's a period of strife in terms of this feeling of being otherized. So if you could expand on that idea of social death.
Yeah, no, just connecting to what Arjit Paji was also adding, that look, there is a artificial, phantasmatic construct called India that's come into being because of British colonialism.
Yeah.
It never existed even as an administration. It never existed as a political unit. And now, because the British supply chain required unitary structure for easier extraction of resources, for easier extraction of labor, and for other reasons, you have this new construct. But what's the lifeblood of this new entity? It's not the colonial extraction, right? Anymore. Those aspects are there. Well, what's driving its elite? What's driving its deep state, as it's popular to talk about now? But what is it at the heart of the Hindu civilization, that's keeping this entity alive? Because you can have a form of spirituality or metaphysics without a nation state at its heart, right? You have Buddhism, you have Taoism, and other forms of spirituality that don't center on a nation state. I think social death, if there has been one continuity in the history of the subcontinent, it's not the state, it's not the nation. It's the form of social death that's been institutionalized through the caste system. And that's the one form that is not only does it survive, it's resilient and it's flourishing. And it has a very accomplished, perhaps the most accomplished, most resilient, most refined history compared to any other form of paradigm of violence. So with its ancient history, with even the emergence of the Buddhist critique of Brahmanism and caste, it survived that. Not only did it survive, it came out intact after 500 years of subjugation or Buddhist rule. It survived the Mughal period, and it flourished in the British period. And now it's reforming itself in the form of a nation state. So the aspect of social death is crucial. And the one thing that's worth noticing is that why do we keep talking about it being a paradigm of violence that's unlike any other? It's because things like anti-blackness or anti-Semitism or Islamophobia or even racism, and other forms of other paradigms of violence, even including capitalistic violence. There is a beginning and an end to that violence. So, for example, you can have a strike at a factory, and the factory owners might call in the police or the military or what have you, and that system, and they come in and you face the brunt of the security forces. They do violence, and then you go back to work, right? Once the system, once you go back to work, the system sort of stops being violent. It wants you to be a productive part of its whole. So the violent aspect only rears its head when there's a disruption. Now, you can also have colonial violence, right? Where you have this ocean of violence that happens at the very beginning of the restructuring of society. So when you need to acquire land and drive off American Indians and take or even take slaves, the violence happens up front. And then you are sort of normalized into whatever form of life that society wants. And the violence secedes, it stops. What's unique about caste violence and Brahmanical paradigm of violence in itself is that there is no end. There is no cessation of violence. There is no performance that there's nothing that you can do as an individual. There's no set of actions or performances or ethical, there's nothing that you can do as an individual to stop that paradigm of violence, to stop the burden of violence. Because you're not dishonored in your action, you're dishonored in your being. You're not dishonored because you transgressed the police or the state or some sort of a rule or regulation. You're dishonored because you are a Dalit. You're dishonored because you are a Sikh or a Muslim. And so that's one side of it, that the dishonor is general. It is not contingent on your performance, on your political activity, on the color of your skin even. You can have a white-looking, very fair Dalit. There's a lot of so-called lower caste in Punjab that have very fair skin, in Rajasthan and UP, but they're still treated in the same way. The second important point, I think, that to point out in the terms of social death that's relevant, that's very unique to this part of the world, the Brahmanical casteism, is that there is, so there's gratuitous violence, and there's also, I'm sorry, Harjit Singh, I got distracted by your hand.
Sorry about that. I wanted to ask you a question quickly on that. I think it'll help you kind of frame it. Because this got me curious, because I've been thinking about this. You're right that the violence happens. But will you say that in the Brahmanical structure, like the Hindu structure, or the violence happens, the disruption is viewed as somebody who is not conforming to the Varnashram Dharma. So the Varnashram Dharma itself demands that that the number three has to basically be disrespected, and there are rituals which have to ensure that that person is disrespected in a certain way by number two and number one. So will it be fair to say that the violence, the extreme kind of violence, comes into picture if somebody disrupts that hierarchy or refuses to really live or accept that way of life?
I think that's the difference, that it's not contingent on your actions. You can be a very good Indian subject and participate in their culture and like Bollywood and be a moderate, and look at the Sikhs in Delhi in 1984. Most of them voted for Congress. That were slaughtered.
Yeah, but sorry to interrupt you, but
they burned the babies, newborn babies.
Yeah,
literally burned them
but
alive,
isn't the
right?
crime
So
the crime of the Sikhs is not the you're very right, but I'm trying to ask you this question. But isn't the crime of the Sikh that they don't accept Varnashram? So in a way, they are disrupting the whole setup of Varnashram.
it's both. I think it's ontological, where it's just your presence. You exist, and you are a threat. The Dalits, there is hardly any militant struggles that came from the Dalits, any forms of like major transgression. But their entire history, right? I mean, they want to be part of the Brahmanical metaphysics by and large, right? They're not like Muslim or Sikh or Buddhist or other sort of critics of Brahmanism in majority of their history. but they had the most brutal form of violence, right, that they faced. So look at the dishonor of their women, the dishonor of their anything and everything sacred. So I think it's both. I think the enunciation of the critique, right, that is definitely a threat. But just your existence, you being there, and I think this makes a lot of the sort of liberal conceptions of violence also fall. You can see the vacuousness of those ways of thinking about violence, because you can be a good Indian subject here in the U.S., minding your own business. You can be a regular Sikh going to Gurdwara, and you can be targeted by the Indian government, right? I think Hardeep Singh Najjar, you and I and everybody that knows anything about Punjab knows there is no existential threat to India. There is no militant struggle. There are no militias at work. There's no organized, even a network of activists that are properly active and effective. The reason why the Indian state comes and shoots Sikhs in the face in their Gurdwara has nothing to do with political utility. At its heart, it is a ritualistic form of violence that is not coming from political rationality, right? It's not coming. So I think those things are not. I'm not going to say they're not. They don't have any explanatory power, right? For sure, when you transgress, you invite the wrath of the state, but they're not the essence of the violence, right? That's not what's the truth of the Indian state's violence is not that it's trying to maintain peace and a secular order. The truth is it has a ritualistic drive to dehumanize and degrade the other. And that's why you see these sort of spectacular forms of violence. Oh, Hanji.
Haji. No, absolutely. I'm just trying to put it in a way that you're absolutely right that rationality demands that India should not, kill Sikhs for the mere act of speaking up. But then Varnashram itself is not based on rationality, uh, because there is greater utility for sure if we let everybody achieve their full potential, and that would mean even maybe the top 15% will also get benefits or fruits of that growth of everybody. If India becomes like America, then the top 15% also benefit, but they prefer even to keep themselves in misery, but to keep the Varnashram
Exactly.
alive, right? So
I mean, there's self-harm. They would rather sacrifice their own GDP.
yes,
This is why I was bringing up other developing nations, Brazil, China, Iran. They face similar ethnic tensions, but none of them resorted to ritualistic violence and degrading and sort of harming the most sacred, most precious parts of a community's life. Their sacred spaces, their relations, their women, their families, and they didn't resort to this ritualistic violence because they don't have that drive at the heart of their civilization. And I wanted to just, point one other aspect that's a bit psychological, but it makes a lot of sense. When you have a colonial form of violence, you extract land, right? You take some commodity from the enemy, even if it's just a ethnic conflict. By killing off the outgroup, you are taking their space. What's happening here in the context of Brahmanical paradigm, there is no commodity. The Dalits have no, for example, commodities to offer, right? They don't have land. There's no other form of commodity that they can extract. You can argue that, even Kashmir, that there is now that there's very little when it comes to commodity itself or land or other things. The history of by and large, the majority history of Brahmanism is the extraction of people's language and being. It's not land, and it's not commodities, and it's not extra, even labor, I would say, is arguably not the main reason for it. It's your honor, because all slave societies are built on the extraction of the degradation and the dishonor of the enslaved, right? And that's what forms the self. That's what constitutes the the self-relation of the society at large. They relate to themselves through this detour of the Dalit, of the other that's degraded, that's subhuman. And that's how you have the entire infrastructure of Brahmanical society built. So I think that that's the other key part of it that's different, right? That there's no other form of paradigm of violence that the world has seen where this is the case.
Yeah,
It's mind-boggling.
that's the to kind of paraphrase it in a way, like from my simple mind. Um, Basically, the ritualistic violence, and I kind of agree with it, is required because if you have to keep varnashram system integrated, it is based upon the acceptance of the slave or the Shudra and the Dalit, who are the bottommost ones, of their really, really subjugated place. So if you don't, and so the dishonor is actually built into the rituals. So if you see many rituals, even the marriage rituals, even like their social rituals, they will publicly dishonor somebody who is, from that particular caste. So that dishonor, and even in their, the religious rituals, so it is a necessity to kind of dishonor that person, to constantly remind that segment of their status with relation to the other segment. And the moment they transgress too much, especially like Sikhs. So Sikhs, if Guru Nanak Pasha comes in and he says, no, nothing doing, everybody sits on the same floor, everybody eat from the same kitchen. Imagine how disruptive that is to the varnashram. So in that case, you will do anything, like you will indulge in not just ritualistic violence, you will do anything under the sun to put an end to that disruption. And because the orderly setup is the varnashram setup in their view, right? Whosoever is benefited the top 15%. So to me, like, while there is a normal dishonor built into the day-to-day living, then there is this extreme kind of violence that comes in the moment you disrupt. So for example, if Dalits, some group of Dalits will dare to do something, and this happened in, I think, a couple of times in Gandhi's era, then there'll be like mass riots and they'll be like taught a lesson, so that they kind of remain in their place. Like Sikhs they openly talk about the 1984, we taught Sikhs a lesson that they should not, walk with their spine erect. So the goal is to subjugation and assimilation of Sikhi. So eventually, if you can assimilate Sikhi and you can corrupt it and bring it in line with Varnashram, and then the problem is solved. So that, to me, in my understanding, that is what drives their urge to assimilate Sikhi, like they have assimilated Jainism or Buddhism. Now Jainist and Buddhist scriptures, you can never be sure whether they are Jain or Buddhist scripture. They have been corrupted multiple times over by the Brahmins to make them part of Brahmanism or Hinduism, and the same is the plan with Sikhi.
And it's weird. It's not just like a regular standard form of, ethnic chauvinism where they want to get rid of the other, or they want to just homogenize the country. It's a very unique setup where they at once claim that everybody is Hindu, that Mecca is used to be a mandir, and that the Vatican is also, site of old temples, and everybody is essentially Hindu. But at the same time, the hierarchies are very stratified. That the upper caste Brahmins and the upper caste Hindus are, like substantially different from others. So it's this paradox that, that where they want the hierarchy to be protected and to be sort of safeguarded, but they also claim that everyone is them. It's an issue of. There's like a friend of mine who's worked on this, and he's a psychiatrist, and he thinks it's because of the lack of the father figure in the tradition, and that's usually where the boundaries are set, and that there's some psychoanalytical causes for this, because they don't have a boundary the way.
ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਚ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ, ਮਜ਼ਾਕ ਚ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਨਾਨੀਆਂ ਕੁੱਟਦੀਆਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ, ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਆ. ਸੌਰੀ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਪੂਅਰ ਜੋਕ, but ਮੈਂ ਸੁਣਿਆ ਕਿ the society is a bit more matriarchal than it should be.
Yeah. No, there is definitely something there. Haji, Karam, did you have
Yeah, no,
Something like that.
I wanted to expand on it because I think we talked about how this was an inflection point, but now that I think of, okay, this is 41 years ago, you know, what do you think has happened in those 41 years? We saw this very, very sort of strong, I would say, like influence of modernity in the 90s, the early 2000s. You have this, like, I think a sort of a secular thinking that has sort of not even secular thinking, that's sort of a weird sort of mutated version of secularism that exploded like the 90s and the early 2000s. And so how do you see this past 41 years in terms of Sikhs and their place and their idea of revolt in sort of the larger context of India? And do you think that genocide for the Hindu majoritarian community, do you think that genocidal impulse has grown, or is that sort of irrational sort of violence, ritualistic violence, still as intense, or is it intensifying? And what factors do you think is leading to that intensification of that? Or Harjeet Singh, I think if any of you guys have answers to that, just sort of an autopsy of the past 41 years of it. I would say many would see that the intensity has grown, where now it's outside of their borders, and it's more rigorous, or hunting people in different countries. But
it's super relevant. No, I think that's a really perceptive question, because the reason why we were talking about the revolution in the title, right, is not just that there's this structural violence on one end, right, of Brahmanism, and then there's nothing on the other side, or there's just a mediocre dissent. I think one of the singular differences, right, that's there for Sikh revolution or Sikh revolt is that it's not about fixing or reforming the order of things. It's not about finding a comfortable, tolerable niche within the system of India, right? Within the system of like the Brahmanical sort of cosmological like hierarchies. It's not finding a comfortable hierarchy within the caste system. It's about changing the ground of social order itself, right? And that doesn't just mean an external critique, right? What's unique about, this is my way of reading it, is that what's unique about Sant Janal Singh Ji and his moment in history is that he is not only in conversation or in engagement or in critique with the Indian state, but also with the larger modern paradigm itself. So the global system of modernity, which is by and large capitalist, or its alternative, the Marxist side of it, they're two sides of the same coin. And the Sikh resistance or the Sikh revolt is really engaging with the world systems through the figure of the Indian nation state, through the figure of the secular Nehruvian, unitary nation state. There is a conversation happening. There's a philosophical conversation happening. And what's happening is that the practicing Sikh and the demographic and the populations, the people around them, they're not just trying to change an aspect of society. They're trying to change the entire society from the ground. And they're trying to change the way they relate to the other. There is a disagreement with the dominant narrative, with the Brahmanical narrative of how to relate with the other. The other is not someone that you degrade and you build your civilization upon their non-humanity. There has to be a transformation of that. And there has to be not just a change in those relations, but change in the way we construct social life itself, the way we relate to truth, the way we relate to the cosmos. So I think that sort of radical, holistic totality of the revolt, right? That's what's really unique about the Sikh moment. And so that's also part of the reason why the Sikhs are such a threat.
Mm-hmm.
Why Sant Janal Singh just practicing Sikhi going village to village, doing the prachar, speaking about this other way of relating to being with others and also being in the world, right? In a very real way. It threatens the authority of the Indian state. And so that's what's really, I think, unique in what's going on, that there's like a political spirituality that is at the heart of the Sikh praxis. On the other side, that's exactly what's most dangerous for a fabricated nation state that's built on a cosmology that divides the entire existence into pure and impure, right? So it's not just Punjab; it's the very existence of India itself, right? That's at the heart of this. That's at the stakes, and I definitely think that there's a fragility, right? That the nation state of India acknowledges its how fragile it is, especially with the recent episode with Pakistan. You see that the facade is cracking, that the drama, the theater is not going to last forever, and there are cracks, in its very notion of itself, and also just logistically, practically, the Sikhs being all over the world, their presence, just Sikh life itself, poses a threat. So that's why you can say, fine, Hardeep Singh Nittar was a activist, so there by some far stretch he deserved some sort of violence from the state, from a ritualistic, fascist state. But why do regular Sikhs, Jagmeet Singh, his brother, other Sikh MPs, they're receiving death threats. I mean, people that speak on here, people that don't even have their real names up, but they're consistent, they have been banned. People that do put their names up, they get death threats regularly. So it's just the existence of Sikh life or Sikh representation in civil society itself that's a threat. And I think that's going to increase, and that's the one thing that they don't know how to control, right? That's the one, I think, redeeming quality of modern life is that there's no way of predicting, what like the social reality is going to be because of media. That's the one aspect that they can't control.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think in my view, like it's kind of same thing what Sardar Amandeep Singh is saying. But I think I used to think liberty is something that Varnashram cannot tolerate, and why it cannot tolerate liberty is because it brings with the idea of it meritocracy. Like if you have liberty, if people are free, then you will progress in your life based upon what your core strengths and your potential is, and that is an anti-thema to varnashram. So when Sardar Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ political demands were Anandpur da Mata, which was autonomy for the state of Punjab, and this demand was there since 50s, from the day the British left India, and Akalis used to go and demonstrate every year, and they will come back with some, nothing happened. It was only when Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale made it serious, when he really organized people through Dharm Yudh Morcha, that the Delhi state realized that, okay, now the things are coming to a head. And there is no way they can let people be free or autonomous, because if you do that, then the Sikhi way of life will survive within Punjab. And you can't let that happen, because what if it spreads to the Ganga Jamuna area? And so you have to go ahead and keep Punjab subjugated, break the self respect of the people to a level that they give up. And that is what is happening today. And I will come in the later part of the discussion, Karam Singh ji, how Punjab's back is almost broken and how close we are to extermination in terms of Sikhs being exterminated from Punjab. But this animosity they have with the Sikhs, they have the similar animosity I have felt with the American way of life. While some of us might not agree with the capitalist model of structuring the economy, and we should not, but the fact is that it gives a relatively a better way of life, and there is a bit of a meritocracy, at least in the 95% of the people. And so there is social mobility. You can be poor, you can become rich, your rich can become poor. But so I see the same hate in the mind of a Hindu nationalist for the American society that I generally see against the Sikhs. But I will just give you one example, Karan Singh, which will tell you that Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwala's conceptual of Khalsa Raj, or how a society should be structured, through one example of his. It was way more than Anandapur Mata, I believe. So there is a conversation which happens, very enlightening conversation. There is this Swamiji, Hindu Swamiji, with a lot of, I think he was some mutt, some leader of the mutt. And that interview is live on YouTube. It's available on YouTube. People can Google it. He was sent by, he had gone there with a big delegation as a representative of Hindus. And he had multiple conversations with Santji, which were all recorded. So on the Langar Hall top, he's sitting there with hundreds of people surrounding them. And he's asking Santji, Santji, what you are doing, I have now stayed here for many days. I am convinced that you are right, you are not a terrorist, and but I will go and I will talk to Indira Gandhi, and I will tell her that you are not a terrorist, and you are a sant. And then Santiji said, okay, good, go ahead, please do it. I'm always wanting to. Then he said, what if Indira wants to talk to you? I'm pretty sure she will like to talk to you. Would you be willing to come to Delhi? And Santiji said, why, yes, I can come to Delhi anytime. But he said, I have one condition. In that one condition, he's describing his condition. Look, the condition he puts. He said, my condition is this. When I go to meet Indira Gandhi, I should not be asked, neither my men should be asked to take off their guns and their weapons. And we will meet her the way we are. And he said, what are you saying? She is the prime minister of the country. How can you meet her with your guns, loaded guns? And he said, okay, fine. If Indira Gandhi is afraid of my guns, you can tell Indira Gandhi. She can come to Darbar Sahib. I will meet her here. She can bring as many gunmen, as many army men with her. None of them will be asked to take off their weapons, and she can meet me as is. He said, what are you saying? And then Santji says, if basically what he's telling him is equality. Just because somebody is a ruler, his life is not more important than the life of a common citizen. That is the principle of the Khalsa. That is why every Khalsa has to be armed, because your life is not less than the life of somebody who's sitting on the throne. So I think in that one, if you guys should try to Google it, and you will find it, his conversations. But I think in that one, when you have such kind of a powerful personality preaching this level of sovereignty to the people on the ground, it's a straightforward threat to Brahmanical way of life, which doesn't even want you to kind of get out of your status as a Shudra.
No, that's right. That's definitely right. And I want to bring the conversation back to sort of the the idea of that the Brahmanistic paradigm, and sort of how Sikhs see themselves in relation to 1984. And I don't want to get into a conversation about progress, has progress been made on the Sikh revolt, but we see these inflection points. Certain things happen in Punjab. You have the Bagadi Morcha. You have sort of the incidents of Biatbi, another ritualistic dishonor. You see these inflection points happen after a couple of years. But I want to get both of your assessments on sort of this genocidal impulse in India, and sort of how you see it evolves over the past 40 years, and how do you see it moving forward the next 40 years, and sort of the issue of transnational repression, or sort of any interesting insights when you see the evolution of what has happened over the past 4 decades, and that sort of genocidal impulse.
Yeah. I can say a couple of things. I think if we identify the problem not as a political, economic conflict, but as a deeper ontological antagonism, right? That's embedded in the very structure of society. Then you can see that this isn't something that can be, how can we say this, wished away with like consciousness raising across the world. If there was only 2 more op-eds explaining, that we're also human, or the Dalits deserve to be part of society. And that's not going to solve this problem because it's tied to the unconscious of a civilization, right? The way they constitute their self is built on a hierarchical stratification of being, where there has to be a lower class subhuman other, non-human other, that defines or gives meaning to those that are upper caste. So, if you look at it like in a linguistic sense, like there's no inherent value, right, in any identity, any word. It gains value in relation to the rest of the world, words in the language, right? Black only means black because of its not being blue and white. Cat only means cat because of it not being a dog, right? So there's a relational dynamic to that, to having, to the constitution of meaning, right? And there's a relational dynamic to the constitution of the self and society. So when your relational dynamic with the other is based on degrading and dehumanizing and making sure that there's an other that's right outside the boundary of the human, right? That's just on the border. He's not human, but he's also not, non-sentient. So when that's the fundamental structure of your, the way you think about yourself, the way your society has thought about its others for thousands of years, that can't be just undone with some, liberal sort of progressivist tactics. There has to be structural, foundational change, and has to be a performance of that change in the sense that it can't just be an intellectual engagement. And what's unique about the Sikh response to this paradigm, right, is that it actually performs the counter revolt, right? It performs a revolt against this system by its own forms of life. So when you have langar, right, where you have the so-called highest and the lowest sitting horizontally on the same plane, or when you have Amrit, where every being is a legitimate hakadar of violence, right? Not just the kshatriya. Every being, every jeev, has the right to have self-respect and dignity and ank. So that sort of leveling of this hierarchy, and then creating institutions around this horizontal, way of being, langar, guru kar, saran, amrit, Sikhi in itself. So, when that actually manifests in real life, we see what's happened in Punjab is that it's not just a critique of Brahmanism, it's the uprooting of Brahmanism from its very base, and it's subversion and inversion. So you have the so-called upper caste, the Brahmins, known as the Pandit, as being the demographic in society that has the least amount of social capital. It's almost a gall to call somebody Chal Pandita, right? That subversion of superiority and of authority, that's the real, essentially, that's the real achievement of a counter system, of a revolt. So Sikhi does that, and Guru Sahib did it, but the institutions of Sikhi have done what has not happened in the entire history of caste. Punjab under Sikhi is the only site in history where caste has been uprooted and subverted. The people that work with their hands are at the top of the social ladder. The Kisan, the Tarkhan, the Jats, the people that really work with the soil. And the people that were supposedly upper caste have the least amount of social capital, and they are essentially, if you have no other occupation, you do something like become a
Joshi. Joshi.
Right. So that's subversion. That's the real response, right? In real life, material sense. And I think this can't be. There's no other responses that are appropriate. It has to be counter. It has to be other forms of life, material changes, and definitely, contesting the outright in the social discourse, what India really is. It's a instrument of Brahmanical violence. There's no other there's no other continuity in their entire history other than caste.
Yeah, just want to touch upon that question, Karan Singh, that you asked, right? There's actually, we say that we have multiple genocides that the Indian state conducted, but you have to keep it in mind that it it is not just the 1984 genocide. To me, the 1984 was a misstep which actually woke up the Sikhs. The Sikh genocide that is happening, which is very imminent, was not the 84 genocide. And you will ask me why? Because the Sikh subjugation and total takeover and destruction of Punjab was planned way earlier in 1950s itself, in the very early years of the so-called Indian Republic. And I want to correct, it was never a secular Nehruvian state. That's a label, yes. India carried, but it was always a Sanatani Hindu terrorist state. So the way it was planned was through construction of these dams on the three waters of Punjab. People should go and watch a documentary on YouTube. Every Sikh should watch it because it is your existential. Like, we are about to be uprooted from Punjab by the looting of the river waters. So what the Indian state first did was constructed two big dams on Ravi, took all the water from Ravi through the hill tracts before it enters Punjab, took all the water and they dump it into Beas, where they constructed two other large dams, and from there constructed further tunnels from Beas and take all the water to Satluj, in where they have Bhakra Nangal dams, where they put it in Govind Sagar reservoir, and from there 90% of the water is sent to other states, and only 5 or 8% water ends up being with Punjab. And and then they put Punjab on using underground water, and that over exploitation of water, underground water in Punjab, where there is no replenishment of groundwater now because the water is being dumped in Rajasthan in a desert. The underground water of Punjab is today at 350 feet. When I was young, which was not very far back, young means, sorry, a child, we could actually, I had seen people digging a well with their own instruments, like manual instruments. Today, at 350 feet, it is poison that is coming out as water. So this whole migration that is happening out of Punjab into West and other areas is not just because of drugs and chitta, that is definitely there, or because of lack of employment. It is primarily because people in Punjab today, thonu uthe you don't get a gabru jawan. Cancer is rampant. Number of kids getting born deformed is rampant, and it is not by chance, it is by design. So this was designed in 1950s itself. And one of the biggest issues was, if you give autonomy to Punjab, along with it came the control of these dams, which the Indian state can never allow. And the reason for putting Punjab in this dire state is that you have to break the backbones of the Sikhs. So they are, either the Sikhs should migrate. So now what is happening in Punjab is Sikhs are migrating out in large numbers, and the Indian state is facilitating it. And the Indian state is pumping in all this Ganga Jamuna into Punjab with the idea of changing the demographics. So if within 5 years, Punjab, the water is going to empty, okay, go total dry, okay? And once the water goes dry, you will not see this fast immigration. People will have to shift overnight because you can't live without water. There'll be mass movement out of Punjab of leftover Sikhs overnight, and they will have to go and dissolve themselves in this vast multitude of Hindus across India. And with that, the Sikhs will be gone, Sikhi will be gone. We will be like Jainis and Buddhists who are just assimilated under the Hindu fold. And that is going to happen, my friends, in next 5 years. So Karam Singh, to your questions, Sikhs today are facing, we were always facing the existential threat, but now we know the timeline of that. Yeah. So in next 5 years, we have to do something.
Just one quick note right next to that. So I think it's apparent, right, that since the last 2 years, that it's no longer a geographically contained problem. And because of globalization, because of surveillance, because of modern techniques of monitoring, there is a concerted effort, and I would say maybe they're spending more resources on the diaspora than they are in Punjab itself, to monitor, to surveil, to suppress, and to intimidate Sikhs. There's a lot to, look at most recently, but in the context of like our entire conversation, it's about the categories, right, of recognized violence, right? That's where the entire discourse is at. That's where the attention, the spotlight of the global society is at. So we see now as a part of this concerted effort is to register not caste, but Hindu phobia and Hindu hate as a new category to be registered in Western civil society, and there's a bill that's being passed in Georgia. So you see these sort of efforts where they know that this is the only section of the demographic that they can't control. So the way they'll control this is by influencing knowledge production and influencing how what sort of categories of crimes and basically global empathy that you can create by manipulating the system. So that's a huge part of what we're going to face here with Hindutva supporters and FBI and other prominent places, with the passage or the attempts of these laws, with Sikh studies chairs being attempted to be opened by the Indian consulates. Right, they're trying to influence all major hubs where Sikhs exist to sort of produce knowledge that is counter to our lived experience. Try to get you to understand that this is actually a Sikh problem, not the problem of caste or India, and also then to constrict you from in your speech. So once these laws pass, they're not going to just target protesters, in front of Hindu establishments. They're going to go into Gurdwara. They're going to go into these type of spaces. They're going to go to any public, place where you are enunciating any critique of India can be identified as Hindu phobia or Hindu hate. And that's a major challenge. That's the type of escalation I think we're going to see in the future, in addition to just straight up arrests and targeting by the FBI.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Those are the tactics. The the game plan is pretty simple in my kind of layman's view. As they eradicate Sikhs out of Punjab, which is very near now, and I keep telling my diaspora born, whether you are first generation immigrant or second generation immigrant, once you lose your homeland, nothing will be left of you. You will be rootless wonder. Okay. But anyways, we'll come to that point. But as the Sikhs are eradicated from Punjab, this is how they know those Sikhs are migrating to West. So as the West gets more and more population of Sikhs, they have to be tackled here as well, because Sikhs can gather together and can gather in the diaspora and then try to take their homeland back. So they can't let that happen, or at least fight back with their freedom of speech, as you pointed out, with telling the world what is going on there. So they can't let that happen. So it is there. It is but obvious that they have to find a way to terrorize the diaspora, the Sikhs in diaspora, control them, infiltrate them, influence them, do whatever is possible, so that they are not able to raise their voice against what is actually going to happen in Punjab in next 3-4 years. So as the demography of Punjab changes, as Punjab turns into a desert, the time is not far off. We are talking about a couple of years. As famine hits, like a water famine hits Punjab, Sikhs run off. All those Sikhs will be consumed within the Hindu fold in this large Hindu India. And in Punjab, they are going to even take over our religious places. Darbar Sahib, they plan to take on, and then they are going to appoint their Granthis, their people, and maybe even put idols in Darbar Sahib. That's the ultimate plan. You have to get rid of Sikhi. You have to make Sikhi a branch of Hinduism. And that is where the things are headed. And the terrorism against diaspora is a part to make sure we are not able to either see it, or even if we see it, we are too scared to basically fight it, what is happening thousands of miles away. So my always urge to the young Sikh youth is कि देखो साडे ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਐਗਜ਼ਾਮਪਲ ਸੈੱਟ ਕੀਤੀ ਨਾ ਸਾਹਿਬਜ਼ਾਦਿਆਂ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਾਨ ਦੇ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਪਰ ਈਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਮੰਨੀ। ਤਾਂ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਲੈਫਟ ਵਿਦ ਓਨਲੀ ਟੂ ਚੋਇਸਿਸ, ਈਦਰ ਵੀ ਗਿਵ ਅਪ ਆਰ ਹੋਮਲੈਂਡ and we accept what they want us to accept, that is our second class status. We zip up our mouths and just do what is acceptable and only do that much that is acceptable to the Hindu terrorist state, or we pick up a fight in using like we because if we lose our homeland Punjab and once they assimilate it totally, I'm telling you the loss that you are going to experience will be irreparable. You might be born in West. You might be thinking you are American. You might be thinking you are Canadian. What I have got to do with Punjab? But 5,000 years of the DNA and that potential that you can ever get in Punjab. You are here only not because your parents migrated here out of a sense of adventure. They had to migrate. They are economic refugees or political refugees. You are also economic refugee or political refugee. And your potential, full potential as an individual, no matter where you're born, if you are a Sikh, will only be realized in the heart or the land of Guru Nanak. And if we lose that, then yeah, I think it'll be irreparable. So we should not lose it. I think what I keep saying now as the next step, what should we do next, Karam Singh? I think it is time, it is high time, given that we are staring at extinction and extermination within next 5 years. It is high time that the Jathebandis in diaspora, the individuals in diaspora, we need to come together and form one umbrella organization which represents all the Sikhs. Whether it is WSO, whether it is Sikh coalition, whether it is A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z, all need to start come together. Somebody has to start this initiative because we don't have time, we don't have the luxury of thinking that we will get together someday, we will get ready in next 50 years, we will have a lot more engineers, we will have a lot more thinkers, and then we will get ready. No, the time is in next 5 years, and I think the jimmedari is on the youth like you, me. I don't know whether I'm a youth, Aman Paji, but definitely on that, and that as well as ਜਿਹੜੇ ਜਥੇਬੰਦੀਆਂ 'ਚ ਬੈਠੇ ਨੇ, ਤੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰ ਦੇਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ। ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰ ਵੀ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਹਾਂ, ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਅਮਨ ਭਾਈ ਨਾਲ ਅੱਜ ਹੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਇੱਥੇ ਐਂਡ ਕਰਨੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਹੁਣ ਯੂਨਿਟੀ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਆ। ਦੇਖੋ ਆਪਸ 'ਚ ਲੜਾਈ ਝਗੜਾ, all this has to end.
Andy, that's a good way to end this. Amandeep, do you want to take another question, or do you want to sort of give to remarks?
Sure, I think we can open it up if there are any specific questions or comments.
Yeah,
I think just in the very end, I think it makes a lot of sense to consolidate our resources and get to a place where we can take action. Because this is this is not an intellectual exercise. The way we exist, even here, the way our lives are going to get configured by the Indian state's restrictions, their violence, it's only going to increase. They might not kill people outright. They might not be as spectacular about it, but the relational dynamic, the entire setup is still going to be the same. So we can count on that, and I think we should organize accordingly. I think it's a great idea to have representatives from all major metro areas or major areas within the North American region come to one platform and form a body. But that's easier said than done. But it's definitely something that we should aspire towards and get the buy-in, from the various organizations. And ideally, it should be folks that are not tainted by existing politics, which is tough. But ideally, people that are getting things done and that are of a younger demographic, and they have a more time here and more sort of sincerity in their work.
Yeah. We can take a couple of questions. Dana, you can go ahead.
Ji Baji, Assalamualaikum and Sat Sri Akal to everybody. Amandeep Bhai, always a pleasure to hear you. it's interesting. I came a little late, but I heard some snippets of what you guys were talking about. Considering, I have a contemporary question, and then then an academic as well. But I would like to hear your thoughts on contemporary question. Considering how we're witnessing the clash of the two states, where one major development took place, which is the abrogation of Simla Agreement. Do you think that it will have wider implications in the region for the people of Punjab and people of Kashmir? And what should be our strategy? What should be our course of action as to potentially turn this, fight between the two states for our own cause, to catapult our own cause to a greater level? Do you think that there is a potential for oppressed communities within the region to rise and kind of capitulate on what's happening between the two countries?
Hanji Bhai Sahab, good to hear from you. It's been a while. I think it's very exciting times that we live in, right? This is sort of unprecedented in our lifetimes. I think there's a lot of opportunity as well as a lot of danger, right? Especially for Punjab with the water situation and how, we got a snippet of it, how they can weaponize it overnight. They opened the floodgates and, flooded Pakistan, just categorically, just without any warning. And they can do the same to Punjab. Punjab is at a huge sort of risk in that sense. And they've used that in the past. But I think at a macro level, if you look at the flow of just the conversation in global discourse, I think there's definitely an appetite to hear more critiques of India and from different voices. And I think there's a huge opportunity on the Pakistan side, where they've been more or less timid or defensive or not as vocal up until now to speak about, the various cases for India's, or just critiquing India in general and advocating for Sikh or advocacy for self-determination at large, but especially the Sikh case, right? I mean, you have Justin Trudeau standing in Parliament, sacrificing his political career, taking a stand against India, but not the political establishment in Pakistan, right? Until now. So I think we have kind of offered them in a silver platter, like the best case study of the critique or the argument to disintegrate India or to bring them to at least the court. And they haven't taken it up until now. So I think that's huge opportunity. They can take that. They do have newfound, confidence from this recent skirmish, right? I think everybody was kind of taken back that this is possible, that India is not this invincible, self-propagating, world power. They're just as vulnerable as any other system in India. The military and their air force is just as vulnerable. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think we should ideally use the UN platform through Pakistan to put our case forward for Kashmir and Khalistan and others. They should give us space, right? It's two birds with one stone. If we get the mic on behalf of Pakistan at the UN for just even the conversation to open up, that, hey, this is what they're doing to us in the name of your markets, that this demands scrutiny, this requires attention, even that would be sufficient, to get things going. And I think there's a huge opportunity that hasn't existed up until now, at least in these conditions, that we should take advantage of.
Yeah, I just to follow up on that too. I think you summarized it well. I think this is an opportunity. I think for both sides to look in the future about stability in the region, and I think other partners and I think superpowers around the world are looking for stability in the region, and I think the six can play an important role. If they have the right partners, and I think it is time where I think the Pakistanis get more aggressive about the situation. I think obviously the six have to do their part in terms of I think proving to both the Pakistanis as well as the world that they have a real stake in the region, and they can deliver if they're assisted, right? So I think it's a huge opportunity, but I think what the Sikh community and I think what a lot of people are saying is that if for us to see Pakistan take a more aggressive position on the Punjab situation, and I think we're turning that corner in a really good way. I think what we're seeing in the past couple of weeks, I think, is very, very positive, and I think a lot of people are proud of how sort of we see Pakistan at the UN, amplifying these ideas and the issue of a Sikhs being assassinated, right? So I think that these are positive steps, but I think with the mistake of history is that when you let your foot off the gas for a little bit, things fall apart. So I think the lesson here is to make sure that our partners are still aggressive in amplifying it, and it's always a two-way street when it comes to partnerships. But I think this is a great moment for Pakistan to expose India, and the Hindutva critique is as big as it has ever been. I don't think we've ever seen this level of critique against Hindutva and Hindu nationalism, and a big part of that is the Muslim community in South Asia that has participated in that critique. As much as so much stuff has happened to the Sikh community in India, the Muslim Indians and Muslims in South Asia have presented that critique and have amplified it for a very long time. So I think there's some synergy there, and if we work together, we can. I think there's political realities that can change. But Harjeet Singh,
but have Muslims in India or South Asia in general have they been able to capitalize on the oppression and suppression that they have been facing through majoritarianism of Hindu state and present it to the world? Rather, it's been weaponized by India, and you will see how Asaduddin Owaisi is at the forefront representing and mending the image of the South Asian Muslims, stating that, oh, look, we are the vanguards of multiculturalism or multi-religious communities that India claims to nurture. Right? I think
got it. Then I got it. I'll answer your question. Okay, I'll answer your question. That's fine. So first of all, couple of things I want to add there. So we have to understand that I think world over India has been exposed. India, everybody from West, everybody knows India is an enemy state. India has no democracy. India is an authoritarian regime. Thanks to, I don't say thanks to, I think it was all caused by multiple reasons, but by one Shaheed, Sardar Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and all the tireless work that the Sikh community did on exposing what the nature of the Indian state is. I don't think anybody today equates India with a democracy. Whosoever does it will basically be laughed at. The situation in the subcontinent is such, with this abrogation of the treaty plus this skirmish that happened between Pakistan and Indian Air Force, where the Pakistani Air Force came across as somebody who's 15 years ahead of the Indian Air Force. And I've done a lot of analysis of the skirmish. It has geopolitical implications. The stage is set. The fact is, the region, the path to stability, peace, prosperity in South Asia goes through Khalistan and independent Kashmir. Only once you have Khalistan, a Sikh state, which will be friendly and with open borders both towards Pakistan, Islamic Pakistan, as well as Hindu India, because the Sikhs have no animosity with the West Punjab. We've lived together as brothers for thousands of years. We ruled this whole area together. Then we have no animosity with Hindus per se. Our problem was with the Hindu state, which was ever more powerful. This state will act as a buffer between these two. It will also open up trade right from Bengal right up to Europe. This state is also not only in the interest of India and Pakistan, also in the interest of China. But the question is, how do we get to this stage? India has never, even if I put you in Modi's position, Modi cannot deliver it. There has to be a situation that has to be created. In my books, the onus today is definitely Pakistan has to do more, but the real onus is actually in the Sikh. The ball is in the Sikh court. The diaspora Sikhs have to organize and create a tir. Punjabi ਚ ਆਪਾਂ tir ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ. English, maybe there is some other word, a representative body that somebody can talk to. If Pakistan today wants to talk to somebody and say they have a plan that, hey guys, you can come and take, let us say, Kartarpur or Nankana Sahib, take it a Vatican City, we'll give you a non-voting, that will get you a non-voting seat in UN. Who are they going to talk to? Is there one single representative body that they can come who has all the legitimacy? We have many Jathebandis. Some are doing very well, some are not doing very well, but we need a representative body. Whom are they somebody will talk to? If United States government has to talk to, there has to be somebody representing the Sikhs. Is there anybody we can name one? SFJ has done a lot of good job on referendum, but can they alone do it? No, they need the backing. The other Jathebandis are also doing a lot of work. So we have to forget all these, competitions between Jathebandis, Chaudarpanthi and Dispanthi. ਅਸੀਂ existential crisis ਚ 5 ਸਾਲ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਨੇ. The time is to get together, create a tir that these governments can talk to. The stage is set in South Asia. And then the Pakistan government will have somebody to talk to. The United States government will have somebody to talk to. The Canadian government will have somebody to talk to. If we are going to rely on these powers to create a faction within Sikhs, then that is not going to be a representative of Sikhs. That is going to be a tool of these powers. And the tools are used and thrown. So we don't want to become a tool. We want to become a tir. The tir, which is independent, Khalsa di tir, the ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਜਥੇਬੰਦੀਆਂ ਬਣਾਉਣਗੀਆਂ. That is where I think the path is, and that is what I urge the Sikh Jathebandis to do. That is the next logical step, which is going to trigger everything else in motion.
Hi, Danny. Is your second part of the question you had?
Yeah, and to cook before Danny, you are right. You're absolutely right. The initiative is not with the Muslims. The Sikhs have to take a lead. If they were able to, like, they are 20 crore, okay? If they were in a position to do something, they would have done something. They are too dispersed in India, and we can't rely on that. The Sikhs are in the position to lead it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, the oppression that Kashmiris are facing right now, it's not making news because the entire news outlets and anything that goes on the ground is choked. It's a complete gag, communication gag, information gag in Kashmir. Not sure if you guys know, there was a gentleman who went to New Delhi a couple of days ago to receive guests from Bangladesh, and he was murdered in broad daylight in Lajpat Nagar in Delhi. And his body was sent back home, and entire vicinity in his area was cordoned off, and huge military deployment was done just to make sure that the funeral of this Shaheed, this martyr, was managed by the state. So we're not even allowed to have our funerals at our own will and what we want to say in those funerals. It's unfortunate, but again, going back to my initial question, Amandeep Paji, is yes, Pakistan is right now amplifying our voices, but how can we institutionalize those voices, Amandeep Paji? And I will draw your attention into history when Pakistan as a nation state existed in United Nations or was in United Nations, and Morocco was under French occupation. and the Moroccan leader wanted to do a speech in United Nations, and because he didn't have a passport, and he had a French passport, so he couldn't do a speech in the United Nations. So Pakistan made a passport and claimed him to be their own citizen, and got an entry into United Nations and made the case for Morocco. So what needs to be done to have Kashmiri voices and Sikh voices institutionalized, rather than becoming sort of, and I don't want to use the word, or for the lack of the better word, the proxies of the state? How long can we be at the helm of policymakers of the region, where they decide whether and when our voices should be amplified?
Yeah, no, it's a double-edged sword, right? And we've been here before. The reason why we're here today is because certain sections of the Pakistani elite, Bhutto specifically, sold, the
Exactly.
of Sikhs. That sealed that was the last nail. 700 reservists that nobody knew about were picked up overnight. So we have to be cautious. But I think there's one channel that's still more or less ungovernable, right, by India, which is the discourse, right? Whether it's through UN or it's through just coordinated media campaigns, or through just knowledge production in general. So instituting centers, instituting, in universities, which are not super expensive, but they could do a lot. I think that route is still to be explored properly. Just the epistemic, warfare, getting your narrative, your experiences, your conceptual sort of genealogy, right, of the problem itself, getting that out. That hasn't happened, right? I mean, in the 40 years of struggle, I've yet to see like a proper articulation of the Sikh cause or the Kashmiri cause in a published book from a major press or major op-eds. I mean, you do a search. There's probably some for Kashmir, but on the Sikh case, there's a lot of noise, but there's hardly anything you can cite. No major paper. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think that there's enough appetite for some sort of critiques. Pakistan, the best thing that they could do is if they just realize like the value of this moment for themselves, not only for us, but for themselves. I mean, they've played their entire media, their cultural sort of production has been very defensive. They've just tried to, over the last 20 years, become like a Pakistani wing of Bollywood, right? There's almost no resistance at the cultural level. The political elite is timid. It's just the army that held up a semblance of, independence. But they have a huge opportunity. If they wanted to, they could build a case that's more effective than anything that they could have come up with, just the Sikh case itself. But also, obviously, others. It's not just a Sikh issue. It's the Brahmanical structure that needs to be called out. I mean, just at the level of recognition of the paradigm, right? Even that is not done. I mean,
But let me cut to the chase here. What is preventing Pakistan right now to establish the embassy for Khalistan and declare the government of Kashmir as a self-representative government? What is preventing the state of Pakistan to establish these?
I can lay out, Dana. I think what is preventing is who is going to own that embassy. Like, which is that one representative of Sikhs who they will invite and say form a government in exile.
It's not just that, right? I think it's one, they're incompetent up until now. Let's just be frank. But there's a lack of sincerity, I would say, in certain sections. They don't want it, but that doesn't mean that they might not see the value of it now in this environment, right? So there's potential, but I'm not,
Yeah, no,
cautious.
but
I'm not too optimistic.
it's very important.
I'm not
It's
too optimistic.
yeah, it's very important to have a umbrella organization, because imagine, let's say today America is there. If somebody wants to do deal with America, they talk to the president of America. Tomorrow, let us say we abolish president. There is no minister. There is no central authority, and somebody wants to do a trade deal with America. Who are they going to talk to? So this is exactly like we need, and that's where I was going. We need unity right now. We need unity. We don't need 100% of Jathebandis to come together, but we need.
You don't need a unity. You need to put a panel. They need to go to Pakistan. They need to go to Islamabad. They need to meet the people. Then make a general consensus. ਏਦਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੰਮ ਚੱਲਦਾ. You need to go there and present yourself. ਏਦਾਂ ਚੱਲਦਾ ਕੰਮ ਹੋਊਗਾ.
No, that's okay. No, but
Next day back in Jalda, you need to go fly first class there, stay there for 10 days, or whoever wants to do that, right? You need to go there, tell them that that's what we are. This is, once you present yourself, that's when they can see, oh, there's real people here, not on the X. So somebody needs to go there and tell them that we're willing to do that.
No, but Lal Bhaji, the question is, somebody can go. It doesn't
So, yeah, I've been listening to this discussion with a lot of interest, and Amandeep Haji, Harjeet Vidi, and others, Karam Singh ji. I 100% agree with your analysis on the Ganga Jamni and the character of the Indian state, which should be a multinational
have any real agency. And that's not a problem that you can solve through communication, through awareness raising, through consciousness raising, through any progressive, liberal, or even Marxist, solutions to this. The problem has to be identified in its true nature for us to approach it properly. And I think even the identitarian lens is limiting because it keeps us connected to this very communal and ethnic view of the problem. The problem is structural, and you're configured by your position in the structure, not by your identity, right? You can have light-skinned Dalits, you can have extremely rich upper-class Sikhs, and they'll get slaughtered the same way when the mob comes. So I think reframing the problem of our suffering under these new categories, right, that are not easy to digest or easy to even register for outsiders because they haven't faced anything this ritualistic and this resilient and this refined. The world has never seen a more accomplished fascist metaphysics than Brahmanism. And there's never been another entity larger than the Indian nation state at its disposal, right? So for us to truly intervene, I think one side has to be an epistemic, intervention where we reframe the problem, where we come to a new grammar, a new syntax of looking at our suffering and uttering, enunciating that, bringing that to life to the world, right? And the other side has to be obviously, consolidating our energies, building networks here and in Punjab, making sure that it doesn't just become a circular echo chamber conversation where we get together and we have this like cathartic release where we talk about what we are experiencing and then go away. So that's the struggle, right? That's always the perennial problem, and how to channelize the momentum into material change and to stay consistent. I think that's what all of us are dealing with in one way or another. But I think these conversations are good beginning. I think it's good to have these, but we need to see real steps, and we need to have more concrete, like consolidated forms of intervening, even at the level of just knowledge production. I mean, you're going to have another bill passed about Hindu hate or Hindu phobia in Georgia that will set the precedent, and before you know it, it's going to be in every major state. And our conversations on X will be the target of that bill, right? They will be able to say any criticism of India is Hindu hate. They'll be in your gurdwara, they'll be in your private, rooms, and they'll weaponize it like anti-Semitism. So for anyone that thinks that discourse is just some intellectual exercise, this is a case study for you to look at. Like, they will have a death grip, on your ability to speak, just free speech, and this will become very real very quickly. So I think the urgency, like Paji has emphasized, is very important to keep that in mind and to come to like actionable things that we can do from here. Something to the tune of a global organization that has like an umbrella aspect that does the work on the ground, provides holistic guidance, gives spiritual guidance, transforms, like we were talking about, the entirety of your being has to be the subject, of the transformation, not just some political activity. Something of that sort should be thought about. I think that's the first step, just to sit down and think of what's possible and go from there. But Hanji, thanks so much, Karam, for hosting this. And thank you everyone for being around. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa,
Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.